content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's good, y'all? What's happening? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the haters, like I always do. What's good with y'all? What's good, haters? Also, man, if you're just coming in, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification button so you can stay abreast of what's going on here on the Green Gorilla channel. And, you know, right about this time, what I want to do is give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel. Shout out to K-Ron S, True King 337, Javon Thompson, Anthony Davis, BGS Ibmore, Life of Commerce, Raphael Brown, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Rais Muajid, and Lionel Jean Louise. Big up to y'all. Big up to Artist and MC, Damon Brown, Donnell 360, Kisses from Afar, Herbert Lewis, Seven Coast Dojo, Rogish the Billmonger, Destro 1, Pulpit 28, Michael Ross, and Charles Rogers. Big up. Shout out to Papa Didas, Travis King, Adam Williams, B. Hillfire, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Timothy Blewett, Brotherly Love, Charles Gilmore, Patricia Colley, and 7Q Pit. Big up to y'all. Big up to Kwaku Asasi, Supertech, Gregory Oliver, Greg, Antonio Feria, Barry Little, Alan Wiley, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, and 77 Base X. Big up to y'all. Big up to Omni Americana, Cameron 87, Deshaun Nolly, Brian Peaks, Nelso, Apex Prowler, Kareem, Doc LaRock, Jay Charles, Mark Holt, Lee Ways, Jeffrey Speed, The Face, and Mark Swift. Big up. Big up to Show Me, Black Dog, Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Cozy Corner, HipHop.catv, Coach DC, Kashif Caldwell, I Am Black Man, Nichita, Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolis, Kyle J. Sura, I'm Just Jules, Brian McMurray, TD Hip Hop Media, and Drew Main. Big up. Big up to Mr. Heat, Afro Shop, Sir Anthony, MLR, Universal 178, Black Swerve 404, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, and C Truth the Revelator. Big up to y'all. Big up to Gold Professor, Arthur Unknown, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalanja Kala, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, True 7360, BK Born Shaheed, James Washington, Hostile ADEP, WPR1, Marvin Battle Jr., and I can't forget my brother in heaven, Force Windu. Big up. And on my Patreon side, I want to give a shout out to Jules Winfield, Romello Scuggs, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Jason Warren, Soul Pen, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Kwaku 217, Dragon 59, Supreme Ibmore, Adrian Hicks, J. Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and Asangwa. Big up to y'all. Y'all deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much for helping me to continue to keep this thing going. Shout out. Thank you so much for your help and your support. I appreciate that. Straight up. And if you're wondering how you can support the channel if you like the content, well, here's how you do it. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today I want to introduce you to my new membership program. that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. What's good, y'all? I'm back, man. I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chasers. And so yesterday, what I did was I read an excerpt from a book entitled Black Skin, White Mask from Frantz, Fanon. And in that excerpt was a discussion about swirling. And the discussion was centered around the neurosis related to black women and their urge to swirl. What underlies or underpins this desire to couple with white men? But today we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to talk about the desire related to coupling, partnering with white women. And we're going to explore what Frantz Fanon would consider to be the neurosis related to that desire. And I know it's a lot of guys, man, especially in this space, that, you know, they might be willing to listen to the criticism or the analysis going in one direction from a psychoanalyst exploring the neurosis of black women, but a lot of y'all are not going to want to hear the inverse of that. But you know what I think? I think you about to get this work. You about to get this work. But it is what it is. So let me just get right to it, man. It's Friday. I don't want to be here all night. So I just want to get through this. I want to complete this because I think they go in tandem. After this, you know, if there's any other work from Frantz Fanon you would like for me to explore and read, and then, you know, have a discussion later on, we can do it. But I'm going to leave this here. And I know a lot of guys, like I said, especially in this space, are not going to be too keen to hear this. But you about to get this work. You about to get this work, man. So at any rate, let me go ahead and just get right to it, man. Let me go ahead and get on down into it. Okay, so let me get to the spot where this starts. I think it's page 61. Okay, 62, 61, whatever. It's chapter 3, again, as I said before. And the title of the chapter is The Man of Color and the White Woman. Okay? And Fanon starts off, out of the blackest part of my soul, across the zebra striping of my mind, surges this desire to be suddenly white. I wish to be acknowledged not as black, but as white. Now, and this is a form of recognition that Hegel had not envisaged. Who but a white woman can do this for me? By loving me She proves that I am worthy of white love. I am loved like a white man. I am a white man. Her love takes me onto the noble road that leads to total realization. I marry white culture, white beauty, whiteness. When my restless hands caress those white breasts, they grasp white civilization and dignity and make them mine. Some 30 years ago, a cold black Negro in a Paris bed with a maddening blonde shouted at the moment of orgasm, "Hurrah for Schokler!" When one recalls that it was Victor Schokler who persuaded the Third Republic to adopt the decree abolishing slavery, one understands why it is necessary to elaborate somewhat on the possible aspects of relations between black men and white women. It will be argued that this little tale is not authenticated, but simply that it could be born and survive through the years is an indication. It is no fallacy, for the anecdote renews a conflict that, active or dormant, is always real. Its persistence attests to the black world's endorsement. To say it another way, when a story flourishes in the heart of a folklore, it is because, in one way or another, it expresses an aspect of the spirit of the group. In analyzing Je suis Martiniquais and Nini, which is, again, I am a black Martiniquais, Martiniquais means a Martinican woman, okay? Je suis Martinique. It's a Martinican woman, okay? And Nini is another story, right? So in analyzing those texts, we have seen how the Negress behaves with the white man. But through a novel by Renee Moran, which seems to be autobiographical, let us try to understand what happens when the man is black and the woman white. The problem is admirably laid out, for the character of Jean Venus will make it possible for us to go much more deeply into the attitude of the black man. What are the terms of this problem? Jean Venus is a Negro, born in the Antilles. He has lived in Bordeaux for years, so he is a European. But he is black, so he is a Negro. There is the conflict. He does not understand his own race, and the whites do not understand him. And he observes, quote, the Europeans in general and the French in particular, not satisfied with simply ignoring the Negro of the colonies, repudiate the one whom they have shaped into their own image, unquote. The personality of the author does not emerge quite so easily as one might wish. An orphan sent to a provincial boarding school, he is compelled to spend his vacations there. His friends and acquaintances scatter all over France on the slightest pretext, whereas the little Negro is forced into the habit of solitude, so that his best friends are his books. At the extreme, I should say that there is a certain accusatory character, a certain resentment, an ill-disciplined aggression in the long list, too long, of traveling companions that the author offers us. At the extreme, I say, but it is exactly to the extreme that we have to go. Unable to be assimilated, unable to pass unnoticed, he consoles himself by associating with the dead, or at least the absent. And his associations, unlike his life, ignore the barriers of centuries and oceans. He talks with Marcus Aurelius, Joinville, Pascal, Pere Galdós, Rabindranath Tagore. If we were compelled to hang a label on Jean Venus, we should have to call him an introvert. Others might call him a sentimentalist, but a sentimentalist who is always careful to contrive a way of winning out on the level of ideas and knowledge. As a matter of fact, his friends and schoolmates hold him in high regard. Quote, "What a perpetual dreamer. You know, my old pal Vanus is really a character. He never takes his nose out of his books, except to scribble all over his notebooks." Unquote. But a sentimentalist who goes nonstop from singing Spanish songs to translating into English. Shy, but uneasy as well. Quote, "As I was leaving them, I heard Devrande say to him, 'A good kid, that Vanus. He seems to like being sad and quiet, but he's always helpful. You can trust him. You'll see, he's the kind of Negro that a lot of white guys ought to be like.'" Unquote. Uneasy and anxious indeed. An anxious man who could not escape his body. We know from other sources that René Marin cherished an affection for André Gide. And this is the author of the work that he's discussing, René Marin. And André Gide was a French literary author who won a Nobel Prize for literature. All right, so that's the backdrop for that. Anyway, Fanon goes on to say, "It seems possible to find a resemblance between the ending of En homme perel en alt and that of Guide's Straight is the Gate. And En homme perel or ou alt is basically, or out, it basically means a man parallel to others, or a man the same as others. All right, that's what that means. All right, this departure, this tone of emotional pain, of moral impossibility, seems an echo of the story of Jerome and Alyssa. But there remains the fact that Vanus is black. He is a bear who loves solitude. He is a thinker. And when a woman tries to start a flirtation with him, he says, quote, "Are you not trying to smoke out an old bear like me? Be careful, my dear. Courage is a fine thing, but you're going to get yourself talked about if you go on attracting attention this way. A Negro? Shameful. It's beneath contempt. Associating with anybody of that race is just utterly disgracing yourself." Unquote. Above all, he wants to prove to the others that he is a man. They're equal. But let us not be misled. Jean Vanus is the man who has to be convinced. It is in the roots of his soul, as complicated as that of any European, that the doubt persists. If the expression may be allowed, Jean Vanus is the lamb to be slaughtered. Let us make the effort. After having quoted Stendhal and mentioned the phenomena of crystallization, he declares that he loves, quote, "André spiritually in Mademoiselle Coulon, and physically in Clarice. It is insane, but that is how it is. I love Clarice. I love Mademoiselle Coulon, even though I never really think of either of them. All they are for me is an excuse that makes it possible for me to delude myself. I study André in them and I begin to know her by heart. I don't know. I know nothing. I have no wish to try to know anything, or rather, I know nothing anymore except one thing, that the Negro is a man like the rest, the equal of the others, and that his heart, which only the ignorant consider simple, can be as complicated as the heart of the most complicated of Europeans." Unquote. For the simplicity of the Negro is a myth created by superficial observers. Quote, "I love Clarice. I love Mademoiselle Coulon, and it is André Mariel who I really love. Only she, no one else." Unquote. Who is André Mariel? You know who she is. The daughter of the poet Louis Mariel. But now you see that this Negro, quote, who has raised himself through his own intelligence and his assiduous labors to the level of the thought and the culture of Europe, is incapable of escaping his race. André Mariel is white. No solution seems possible. Yet, association with Payot, Guides, Moreas, Voltaire seem to have wiped all that out. In all good faith, Jean Venus believed in that culture and set himself to love this new world he had discovered and conquered for his own use. What a blunder he had made. Arriving at maturity and going off to serve his adopted country in the land of his ancestors was enough to make him wonder whether he was not being betrayed by everything about him. For the white race would not accept him as one of its own, and the black virtually repudiated him. And, this quote that he takes from Moran's book, is basically saying, like, man, I'm going off to serve my adopted country in my own ancestors' land. They don't accept me, and the people there don't accept me either. So he's in a liminal state. He's in a kind of a limbo state. Okay? John Venus, feeling that existence is impossible for him without love, proceeds to dream it into being. He proceeds to dream it alive and to produce verses. When a man loves, he must not speak. Best that he hide it from himself. Andre Mariel has written to him that she loves him, but Jean Venus needs authorization. It is essential that some white man say to him, "Take my sister." Venus has put a certain number of questions to his friend, Coulon's. Here, more or less in extenso, is what Coulon answers. "Oh boy, once again you bring me your problem. Once again I will give you my opinion, once and for all." And this is a white man talking. "Let us proceed in an orderly fashion. Your situation, as you have explained it, to me is as clear as it can be. Allow me nevertheless to clear the ground before me. It will be all to your good. How old were you, anyway, when you left home to go to France? 3 or 4, I think. You have never seen your native island since, and you have not the slightest interest in seeing it again. You have lived in Bordeaux ever since, and ever since you became a colonial official, Bordeaux is where you have spent the greatest part of your leaves. In short, you are really one of us. Perhaps you are not altogether aware of the fact. In that case, accept the fact that you are a Frenchman from Bordeaux. Get that into your thick head. You know nothing of your compatriots of the Antilles. I should be amazed, in fact, if you could even manage to communicate with them. The ones I know, furthermore, have no resemblance to you." And that's a powerful quote, that's a powerful statement to make. It's a white man telling a black man that he's not really like the black folks from whence he comes. He's an honorary white man now, a Frenchman. It's crazy. In fact, it's actually insane. Okay? But this is the way white folks think. I know for a fact this is how a lot of them think. Okay? The idea is to educate you out, to enculturate you out of your own culture and to adopt theirs wholeheartedly. So as to be able to pin you down, to put you in a box, to be able to gather where you're coming from. And there's all too many black folks all throughout the world, male, female, who are willing to jump into that box. I'm just saying. To the point where they can't even recognize their own culture. They have no affinity for it at all. They study everything European. This is what Carter G. Woodson talks about in The Miseducation of the Negro. Did you study everything European? You know so much about Europe, but you know nothing about your own culture's customs and traditions. Nothing. The ones I know, furthermore, have no resemblance to you. In fact, you are like us. You are us. Your thoughts are ours. You behave as we behave, as we would behave. You think of yourself. Others think of you as a Negro? Utterly mistaken. You merely look like one. As for everything else, you think as a European. And so it is natural that you love as a European. Since European men love only European women, you can hardly marry anyone but a woman of the country where you have always lived. A woman of our good old France, your real and only country. So that's like, hey, you can't love any Antillean woman because you're not like them. You think like us. You behave like us. It's only natural that you should want a woman from France, a white woman from France. This being the case, let us get on to the subject of your latest letter. On the one hand, we have one, Jean Venus, who resembles you like a brother. On the other, we have Mademoiselle Andre Mariel. Andre Mariel, whose skin is white, loves Jean Venus, who is extremely brown and who adores Andre Mariel. But that does not stop you from asking me what must be done, you magnificent idiot. As soon as you are back in France, rush to the father of the girl who already belongs to you in spirit and strike your fist savagely on your heart as you shout at him, I love her. She loves me. We love each other. She must marry me. Otherwise I will kill myself here and now. And this is Frantz Fanon's commentary. When the question is put, When the question is put directly, then, the white man agrees to give his sister to the black, but on one condition. You have nothing in common with the real Negroes. The real Negroes? When the question is put directly, then, the white man agrees to give his sister to the black, but on one condition. You have nothing in common with real Negroes. You are not black, extremely brown. Like, what kind of crazy shit is that, man? He's not black, he's extremely brown. This procedure is quite familiar to colored students in France. Society refuses to consider them genuine Negroes. The Negro is a savage, whereas the student is civilized. You're us, Coulomb tells him. And if anyone thinks you are a Negro, he is mistaken, because you merely look like one. But Jean Venus does not want this. He cannot accept it because he knows. What does he know? Well, he knows he's a Negro. Bottom line. He knows that. Enraged by this degrading ostracism, mulattoes and Negroes have only one thought from the moment they land in Europe, to gratify their appetite for white women. And then I think he's going off into a quote here. The majority of them, including those of lighter skin, who often go to the extreme of denying both their countries and their mothers, tend to marry in Europe, not so much out of love as for the satisfaction of being the master of a European woman. And a certain tang of proud revenge enters into this. And so I wonder whether in my case there's any difference from theirs, whether by marrying you, who are a European, I may not appear to be making a show of contempt for the women of my own race, and above all, to be drawn on by desire for that white flesh that has been forbidden to us Negroes as long as white men have ruled the world, so that without my knowledge, I am attempting to revenge myself on a European woman for everything her ancestors have inflicted on mine throughout the centuries. Damn, that's a powerful statement right there. You know, I talked about how yesterday, you see remnants of this sentiment. You know, I have to conquer a white woman, just like black women were conquered during either colonialization or slavery. You see this in Soul on Ice, Eldridge Cleaver. You see it in the autobiography of Malcolm X. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's other instances of this, but those are just two that pop up in my immediate, mental Rolodex. Anyway, Frantz Fanon goes on and says, what a struggle to free himself of a purely subjective conflict. I am a white man. I was born in Europe. All my friends are white. There are not 8 Negroes in the city where I live. I think in French. France is my religion. I am a European. Do you understand? I am not a Negro. And in order to prove it to you, I, as a public employee, am going to show the genuine Negroes the differences that separate me from them. Indeed, read the book again and you will be convinced. And I see a lot of brothers, man, even in this space, take great pains to separate themselves from other Negroes because they're culturally refined. In essence, one could argue they're saying, I think like a white person, a superior person culturally, unlike the Negroes. The thugs, the pookies, whatever you want to call it. I'm not like them. I'm more like white people. Let me show you there's a difference now. There's a difference. And then he quotes it, who knocked on the door? Ah, yes, of course. Is that you, Sua? Yes, Major. What do you want? Roll call, Major. 5 men guard, 17 men prisoners. Everybody here. Anything else new? Any word from the runner? No, sir, Major. Monsieur Vanous has native bearers. He has a young Negro girl in his house. And to the Negroes who seem downcast that he is leaving, he feels that the only thing for him to say is, please go away. Please go away. You see how unhappy it makes me to leave you? Please go. Now, I will not forget you. I am leaving you only because this is not my country, and I feel too alone here, too empty, too deprived of all the comfort that I need, but that you, luckily for you, do not yet require. When we read such passages, we cannot help thinking of Felix Ebu, unquestionably a Negro, who saw his duty quite differently in the same circumstances. Jean Vanous is not a Negro and does not wish to be a Negro, and yet, without his knowledge, a gulf has been created. There is something indefinable, irreversible. There is indeed that within of Harold Rosenberg. Louis T. Achille said in his report to the interracial conferences of 1949, insofar as truly interracial marriage is concerned, one can legitimately wonder to what extent it may not represent for the colored spouse a kind of subjective consecration to wiping out in himself and in his own mind the color prejudice from which he has suffered so long. It would be interesting to investigate this in a given number of cases and perhaps seek in this clouded motivation the underlying reason for certain interracial marriages entered into outside the normal conditions of a happy household. Some men or some women, in effect, by choosing partners of another race, marry persons of a class or a culture inferior to their own, whom they would not have chosen as spouses in their own race, and whose chief asset seems to be the assurance that the partner will achieve denaturalization, and to use a loathsome word, deracialization. Among certain people of color, the fact that they are marrying someone of the white race seems to have overridden every other consideration. In this fact, they find access to complete equality with that illustrious race, the master of the world, the ruler of the peoples of color. Now, I mean, basically he's saying that there are a lot of people who, for whatever psychological reason, decide that marrying people in their own race is just for racial reasons is absolutely beneath them, so much so that they'll marry someone from a lower caste in the other race or class in the other race just in order to have contact with whiteness. That's what he's saying. So then he says, we know historically that the Negro, guilty of lying with the white woman, is castrated. The Negro has had a white woman makes himself taboo to his fellows. It is easy for the mind to formulate this drama of sexual preoccupation. And that is exactly the ultimate goal of the archetype of Uncle Remus. Brer Rabbit, who represents the black man. Will he or will he not succeed in going to bed with the two daughters of Mrs. Meadows? There are ups and downs, all told by a laughing, good-natured, easygoing Negro, a Negro who serves with a smile. During the time when I was slowly being jolted alive into puberty, I had the honor of being able to look in wonder on one of my older friends who had just come back from France and who had held the Parisian girl in his arms. I shall try to analyze this problem in a special chapter. Talking recently with several Antillians, I found that the dominant concern among those arriving in France was to go to bed with the white woman. As soon as their ships docked in Le Havre, they were off to the houses, the brothels. Once this ritual of initiation into authentic manhood had been fulfilled, they took the train for Paris. But what is important here is to examine Jean Venus. To this end, I shall resort in considerable measure to a study by Germain Go, La Névrose d'Abandon. What does that mean? The neurotic abandonment. I think that's what that means. Neurotic abandonment. Oh, abandoned neurosis. Okay. Contrasting what she calls the abandonment neurosis, which is pre-Oedipal in nature. The real post-Oedipal conflicts described by Orthodox Freudians. Dr. Go analyzes two types, the first of which seems to illustrate the plight of Jean Venus. It is this tripod, the anguish created by every abandonment, the aggression to which it gives rise, and the devaluation of self that flows out of it that supports the whole symptomology of this neurosis. Anguish, aggression, devaluation. Okay? We made an introvert of Jean Venus. We know characterologically, or better, phenomenologically, that autistic thinking can be made dependent on a primary inversion. So he's using some psychological terms here, right? And then he's going to explain it, right? So, autistic thinking can be made dependent on a primary, not inversion, but an introversion. In a patient with the negative aggressive type, obsession with the past and with its frustrations, its gaps, its defeats, paralyzes his enthusiasm for living. Generally, more introverted than the positive loving type, he has a tendency to go back over his past and present disappointments, building up in himself a more or less secret area of bitter, disillusioned resentments that often amounts to a kind of autism. But unlike the genuine autistic person, the abandonment neurotic is aware of this secret zone, which he cultivates and defends against every intrusion. More egocentric than the neurotic of the second type, positive loving, he views everything in terms of himself. He has little capacity for disinterestedness. His aggressions and a constant need for vengeance inhibit his impulses. His retreat into himself does not allow him to have any positive experience that would compensate for his past. Hence, the lack of self-esteem and therefore of effective security is virtually total in such cases. And as a result, there is an overwhelming feeling of impotence in relation to life and to people, as well as a complete rejection of the feeling of responsibility. Others have betrayed him and thwarted him, and yet it is only from these others that he expects any improvement in his lot. So, here at this point, he's offering what he considers to be a prognosis or a diagnosis of Jean Venus psychologically. Okay? He is feeling anguish by abandonment, and he responds to it with aggression, which leads to a devaluation of himself. He's stuck in the past and the present, and he's dependent on others in order to build up his self-esteem, but they cannot do it for him because of the neurotic condition which prevents a resolution to the conflict. Okay? So he says, Fanon does, a magnificent description into which the character of Jean Venus fits perfectly. For he tells us, arriving at maturity and going off to serve my adopted country in the land of my ancestors was enough to make me wonder whether or not I was being betrayed by everything about me. For the white race would not accept me as one of its own, and the black virtually repudiated me. That is precisely my position. The attitude is one of recrimination towards the past, devaluation of self, incapability of being understood as he would like to be. Listen again to Jean Venus. Who can describe the desperation of the little Hottentots, which is, an African tribe, right? Who can describe the desperation of the little Hottentots, whose parents, in the hope of making real Frenchmen of them, transplant them to France too early? From one day to the next, they are locked into boarding schools. These free, joyful children, for your own good, as their weeping parents tell them. So he's giving an account of his own life where you have colonialists taking children away from their native from their native geographical location and placing them in boarding schools. This is psychological warfare. That's psychological warfare. They tried to do it with the Native Americans. They did it with black folks in America. That's one of the parts of the colonial project, to educate the children. So it's called cultural imperialism. That's what it's called. Okay. Anyway, I was one of these intermittent orphans, and I shall suffer for it throughout my life. At the age of 7, I and my introduction to learning were turned over to a gloomy school far out in the country. The 1,000 games that are supposed to enliven childhood and adolescence could not make me forget how painful mine were. It is to this schooling that my character owes its inner melancholy and that fear of social contact that today inhibits even my slightest impulses. And yet he would have liked to be surrounded, enclosed. He did not like to be abandoned. When school vacations came, all the other boys went home. Alone. Note that word, alone. He remained in the big empty white school. And he's quoting, the character here. Oh, those tears of a child who had no one to wipe them. He will never forget that he was apprenticed so young to loneliness, a cloistered existence, a withdrawn, secluded existence in which I learned too soon to meditate and to reflect. A solitary life that in the end was profoundly moved by trifles. It has made me hypersensitive within myself, incapable of externalizing my joys or my sorrows, so that I reject everything that I love, and I turn my back in spite of myself on everything that attracts me. And so Fanon says, well, what's going on here? Because he's a psychologist. 2 processes. I do not want to be loved. Why not? Because once, very long ago, I attempted an object relation and I was abandoned. I have never forgiven my mother because I was abandoned. I will make someone else suffer, and desertion by me will be the direct expression of my need for revenge. I will go to Africa. I do not wish to be loved, and I will flee from love objects. That, Jermaine Goh says, is called putting oneself to the proof in order to prove something. I do not wish to be loved. I adopt a defensive position, and if the love object insists, I will plainly say, I do not wish to be loved. Devaluation of self? Indeed, yes. This lack of esteem of self as an object worthy of love has grave consequences. For one thing, it keeps the individual in a state of profound inner insecurity, as a result of which it inhibits or falsifies every relation with others. It is as something that has the right to arouse sympathy or love that the individual is uncertain of himself. The lack of effective self-valuation is to be found only in persons in their early childhood suffered from a lack of love and understanding. The lack of effective self-valuation is to be found only in persons who in their early childhood suffered from a lack of love and understanding. Damn. John Vanus would like to be a man like the rest, but he knows that his position is a false one. He is a beggar. He looks for appeasement, for permission in the white man's eyes. For to him, there is the other. And he's making reference to an existential term. The other, okay? Effective self-rejection invariably brings the abandonment neurotic to an extremely painful and obsessive feeling of exclusion, of having no place anywhere, of being superfluous everywhere in an effective sense. I am the other is an expression that I have heard time and time again in the language of the abandonment neurotic. To be the other is to feel that one is always in a shaky position, to be always on guard, ready to be rejected, and unconsciously doing everything needed to bring about exactly this catastrophe. It would be impossible to overestimate the intensity of the suffering that accompanies such desertion states, a suffering that in one way is connected to the first experiences of rejection in childhood and that brings them back in all their strength. The abandonment neurotic demands proofs. He is not satisfied with isolated statements. He has no confidence. Before he forms an objective relation, he exacts repeated proofs from his partner. The essence of his attitude is not to love in order to avoid being abandoned. The abandonment neurotic is insatiable. That is because he claims the right to constant amends. He wants to be loved completely, absolutely, and forever. Listen, my dearest Jean, I got your letter of last July only today. It is completely mad. Why torture me this way? You are aware of the fact. You are incomparably cruel. You give me happiness mixed with anxiety. You make me the happiest and at the same time the unhappiest of women. How many times shall I have to tell you that I love you, that I belong to you, that I am waiting for you? Come. The abandonment neurotic has finally deserted. He is called back. He is needed. He is loved. And yet what fantasies? Does she really love me? Does she look at me objectively? One day a man came, a great friend of Daddy Ned, who had never seen Pont-à-Pont. He came from Bordeaux, but good God, he was dirty. God, how ugly he was. This man who was such a good friend of Daddy Ned. He had a hideous black face, completely black, which showed that he must not wash it very often. Looking eagerly for external reasons for his Cinderella complex, Jean Vanus projects the entire arsenal of racial stereotypes onto a child of 3 or 4 years. And to Andre, he says, "Tell me, Andre, darling, in spite of my color, Would you agree to marry me if I asked you? He is frightfully full of doubt. Here is Jermaine Go on that subject, and he's making reference to a psychologist in order to give some sort of diagnosis of Jean Venus, or Jean. The first characteristic seems to be the dread of showing oneself as one actually is. This is a broad field of various fears: fear of disappointing, fear of displeasing, of boring, of wearying, and consequently of losing the chance to create a bond of sympathy with others, or, if this bond does exist, of doing damage to it. The abandonment neurotic doubts whether he can be loved as he is, for he has had the cruel experience of being abandoned when he offered himself in the tenderness of others as a little child, and hence without artifice. Jean Venus does not, however, lead a life devoid of compensations. He flirts with art. His reading list is impressive. His essays on Suarez is quite perceptive. That too is analyzed by Jermaine Go. Imprisoned in himself, locked into his artificial reserve, the negative aggressive feeds his feeling of irreparable loss with everything that he continues to lose or that his passivity makes him lack. Therefore, with the exception of such privileged sectors as his intellectual life or his profession, he cherishes a deep-seated feeling of worthlessness. Where does this analysis lead us? To nothing short of proving that Jean Venus, that in fact, he is not like the rest. Making people ashamed of their existence, Jean-Paul Sartre said. Yes. Teaching them to become aware of the potentials they have forbidden themselves, of the passivity they have paraded in, just those situations in which what is needed to hold oneself like a sliver to the heart of the world, to interrupt, if necessary, the rhythm of the world, to upset, if necessary, the chain of command, but in any case, and most assuredly, to stand up to the world. Jean Venus is the crusader of the inner life. When he sees Andrea again, when he is face to face with this woman whom he has wanted for months and months, he takes refuge in silence, the eloquent silence of those who know the artificiality of words and acts. Jean Venus is a neurotic, and his color is only an attempt to explain his psychic structure. If this objective difference had not existed, he would have manufactured it out of nothing. Jean Venus is one of those intellectuals who try to take a position solely on the level of ideas, incapable of realizing any concrete contact with his fellow man. He is treated decently, kindly, humanly, only because he has stumbled on some servant secrets. He knows those people, and he is on guard against them. My vigilance, if one can call it that, is a safety catch. Politely and artlessly, I welcome the advances that are made to me. I accept and repay the drinks that are bought for me. I take part in the little social games that are played on deck, but I do not allow myself to be taken in by the goodwill shown me, suspicious as I am of this excessive cordiality that has rather too quickly taken place of the hostility in the midst of which they formerly tried to isolate me. He accepts drinks, but he buys others in return. He does not wish to be obligated to anyone, for if he does not buy back, he is a nigger, as ungrateful as all the others. Is someone mean? It is simply because he is a nigger, for it is impossible not to despise him. Well, it is clear to me that Jean Venus, alias Rene Morin, is neither more nor less than a black abandonment neurotic. He is put back into his place, his proper place. He is a neurotic who needs to be emancipated from his infantile fantasies. And I contend that Jean Venus represents not an example of black-white relations, but a certain mode of behavior in a neurotic who by coincidence is black. So the purpose of our study becomes more precise: to enable the man of color to understand, through specific examples, the psychological elements that can alienate his fellow Negroes. I will emphasize this further in the chapter devoted to phenomenological description, But let us remember that our purpose is to make possible a healthy encounter between black and white. Jean Venus is ugly. He is black. What more is needed? If one rereads the various observations of Germain Goh, one will be convinced by the evidence. Un homme pareil au autre is a sham, an attempt to make the relations between two races dependent on an organic unhealthiness. There can be no argument. In the domain of psychoanalysis, as in that of philosophy, the organic or constitutional is a myth only for him who can go beyond it. If from a heuristic point of view, one must totally deny the existence of the organic, the fact remains, and we can do nothing about it, that some individuals make every effort to fit into pre-established categories, or rather, yes, we can do something about it. Earlier, I referenced to Jacques Lacan. It was not by accident. In his thesis presented in 1932, he violently attacked the idea of the constitutional. Apparently, I am departing from his conclusions, but my dissent will be understood when one recalls that for the idea of the constitutional, as it is understood by the French school, I am substituting that of structure. Embracing unconscious psychic life as we are able to know it in part, especially in the form of repression and inhibition, insofar as these elements take an active part in the organization peculiar to each psychic individuality. As we have seen on examination, Jean Venus displays the structure of an abandonment neurotic of the negative aggressive type. One can attempt to explain this reactionally, that is, through the interaction of person and environment, and prescribe, for example, a new environment, a change of air. It will properly be observed that in this case, the structure has remained constant. The change of air that Jean Venus prescribed for himself was not undertaken in order to find himself as a man. He did not have as his purpose the formulation of a healthy outlook on the world. He had no striving towards the productiveness that is characteristic of psychosocial equilibrium, but sought rather to corroborate his externalizing neurosis. The neurotic structure of an individual is simply the elaboration, the formation, the eruption within the Negro of conflictual clusters arising in part out of the environment and in part out of the purely personal way in which that individual reacts to these influences. Just as there was a touch of fraud in trying to deduce the behavior of Nini and Mayat Capitia, a general law of the behavior of the black woman with the white man, there would be a similar lack of objectivity, I believe, in trying to extend the attitude of Venus to the man of color as such. And I should like to think that I have discouraged any endeavors to connect the defeats of Jean Venus with the greater or lesser concentration of melanin in his epidermis. The sexual myth, the quest for white flesh, perpetuated by alienated psyches, must no longer be allowed to impede active understanding. In no way should my color be regarded as a flaw. From the moment the Negro accepts the separation imposed by the European, he has no further respite. And it is not understandable that thenceforward he will try to elevate himself to the white man's level. To elevate himself in the range of colors to which he attributes a kind of hierarchy. We shall see that another solution is possible. It implies a restructuring of the world. So that's a lot, man. I mean, that's a lot to unpack. But, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to come back. I got at least one brother who is behind board, and I want to see what his response to this is. So I'll be right back. Give me 1 second, man. I've been reading for about an hour, so let me be right back. All right, man, I'm back. And right now I'm joined by Diego Ife. And I'm gonna cut the music off. Let me cut the music off, man, because you're not gonna mute. You're not gonna mute the audio when you talk. So make sure I cut that off. It'll become muted when I talk, but it won't do so when you talk. So, what are your initial impressions and thoughts? Like, I could have, gotten somebody, some secondary literature in order to make this short and sweet. But I figure, like, why not actually just read it? You know what I'm saying? Like, why not just read Frantz Fanon as a direct primary source and then get your take on it, because that's the best way, without having it filtered through somebody else's lens. So what do you think, Diego?
Yeah, it's very, very insightful. Yeah, I'm calling from the UK, by the way. But yeah, no, it's definitely very insightful. Got me thinking because I'm actually writing a book on identity, Black identity and stuff. And some of the content I've written, when I was listening to your, shall I say, your reading of the book, it brought that to mind. So just a quick one. Is my microphone clear? Is it fuzzy at all?
Oh, it's perfectly clear.
Okay, cool, no problem. Yeah, so I kind of made a few notes so that because a lot of thoughts came to mind. As you said, it's quite a lot to unpack. How I would put it is that his mindset came at a time which was, I guess, different to people, say, in the West, who also kind of want to escape their ethnic constraints. So from when he was around, I think there was a kind of like a zeitgeist, shall I say, called Jacobin. And what that effectively was that anyone who was, shall I say, French or within the French colonies, who came to metropolitan France, they were sort of tasked with trying to assimilate, if that makes sense. Now, from reading what you've, listening to what you've read, it sounds as if his psyche took a perverse turn where he really kind of, shall I say, brought into, when it comes down to stuff like this, rather than focusing on what I call the end goal, the idea for him in France was to survive, right? But then he's taken it to another level where he's almost as if, shall I say, valorized and almost worshipped the white skin. It's not too dissimilar to people who may style their hair a certain way, which might be more kind of redolent of the mainstream society, the white population, or adopting certain mannerisms to kind of put themselves closer or place themselves closer to those white ideals. But like I said, sometimes people overcompensate with that attempt to survive. And definitely from what you've read, it does appear that that's what he did. There's something that you said as well with respect to people in America, shall I say, Black people in America, who, because I guess this would also apply in the UK to an extent, but the whole Pookie and Ray Ray thing, in the UK, we call it like Roadman. And that in itself, what you have, what I'll call an identity vacuum. If you're like in a, shall I say, in a host society, if you want to call it that. I'm not sure if host society would be the word, because Black Americans do have a valid claim to indigeneity, no more, shall I say, no less than the Europeans. But just for lack of a better word, when you're a so-called minority, if you will, there's an identity vacuum. What do you do about it? Bringing it back to that Jacobin idea, or that, shall I say, that mindset. Nowadays, or shall I say, in the last few decades, we've had that whole kind of reclaiming Blackness. Shall I say, the whole Black is beautiful, shall I call it, movement, shall I say, from like the halfway through the 20th century, the popular culture as well, which has also developed at the back of that. And that's given people a voice and something to connect with as well, which if they hadn't had that, then you might have had even more people that were trying to, or shall I say, taking on the same mindset as Fanon. So that ultimately comes down to survival. Above all else, when it comes to race and what have you, it comes down to survival. And so certain people are just thinking of what they need to do to assimilate as effectively as possible. And sometimes they can overcompensate when it comes to demonstrating that loyalty to the mainstream society, But even to use the Pookie and Ray Ray example, that in itself may not necessarily be attributable to culture, which is, say, shall I say, African or Native American. but it's more of a development on sort of the US shores. There's a book written by Thomas Sowell called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. Now, it's not a case of me agreeing with what he's written, but he did put some stuff in that book which is quite thought-provoking. And certain sentiments definitely developed in the South. For example, with respect to the identity vacuum, what do you do to survive? Do you have like a middle road? Do you accentuate what people consider to be, blackness? What is blackness at the end of the day? Is it white liberals that have helped to kind of circumscribe the idea of being black? What contribution have they made? And outside of, shall I say, white liberal influence, what have black people in America, and I guess outside, given the UK's taken on a lot of American influences, what say do they have in the idea of blackness? Because why I say that is stuff like, don't get me wrong, you've got different people from different educational levels, and there can be some snobbery, there can be sort of inferiority or superiority complexes that kind of manifest themselves in that respect. But what I'm effectively saying is there's different forms of blackness. And I think that part of some of these phenomena is not quite understanding where people are coming from, if that makes sense. So you've got people overcompensating in either direction. Certain people that are trying too hard to reinforce what they think is black, and those that are trying to sort of demonstrate and reinforce that which they think is the antithesis of blackness, when most humans kind of prefer something that's in the middle. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack. A lot of that stuff, like I said, is to do with certain pathologies. And it does sort of raise a wider question as to the psyche of black people today in the West. And you mentioned something else about the sort of global influence of almost trying to escape one's race or the ethnic constraints. You even have it in countries like Africa, especially in places like Nigeria, where there's this effort to really align oneself with that which is white. I guess in a way, it's almost like a buffet where you pick the bits of what, say, a black America or black Western culture kind of appeals, and then that which is more normative of, in quote, whiteness. So yeah, that's probably a bit of a mouthful from me, but
oh yeah, good commentary. I mean, as it pertains to authenticity in relation to being black or white. I mean, you just with this John Vanus character, right, that Frantz Fanon is mentioning, is a kid who, for the most part, was taken from his country, his native habitat, and forced into boarding schools, and, was inculcated with these ideas that, France was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that, in order to overcome, his differences, he would have to be more French than a Frenchman. Yeah. I mean, his French would have to be more impeccable. His understanding of European and Western culture would have to be superlative to that of his white French counterparts. And therein lies the problem, because he doesn't have a way to really actually interact and, authentically connect with people from, his culture, the stock from which he came. Because I'm pretty sure, if his mother wasn't educated the way he was, if his father wasn't educated the way he was, right, then what, if he's isolated away and abandoned, so to speak, how is he able to go back and actually connect with those people? I mean, and to have an authentic connection. Go ahead.
Sorry. So continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, so the question being presented is that, this kind of treatment that he had to undergo created all kinds of neurotic conditions within him, and so, one of the things that Frantz Fanon is trying to point out is that, that happened because of race. Okay, that's what occurred, and the racial component created the neurosis, which led to an authentic interaction between him and the white woman that he desired, which on the one hand was supposed to, prove the sanctity of his, connection to high culture or French civilization. But at the same time, because of the neurosis that was caused by the racism, it prevented him from being able to have, an authentic and a healthy relationship with that white woman. So, it's and then but at the beginning of the chapter, Frantz Fanon talks about how a lot of black men, just have this conquering attitude, or like a revenge attitude, and one of the ways that they fulfill it is to have sex with white women. Okay, but in John Venusa's case, it's a little bit different because he's an abandonment neurotic. He wants everybody to feel what he's felt. He wants to abandon people. And he does so by getting angry, the negative aggressive type. So I would consider that to be probably like a passive aggressive type. Not really aggressive outwardly, but aggressive passively. And rejects any connections. He can't form the connection, so he isolates himself within the context of his, his studies or whatever the case may be. But in terms of authentic black culture, I'm aware of Soul's work, the black rednecks, white liberals. I do understand what, Soul is trying to get out of that book. It's like, look, the rednecks, black people have, adopted many of their cultural idioms and their behavior, because they were the original niggas, to use a crass term. So they are the original Negroes, right? These rednecks. And so black people have adopted redneck culture, not the higher culture, of Anglo, Saxon kind of an Anglo-Saxon kind. They adopted the worst elements of European culture and have begun to perpetuate it so as to prevent themselves from being able to progress alongside of the people who really are in possession of the high Anglo-Saxon culture. Look, bro, what is authentic black culture? I can tell you what it ain't. It ain't Carlton Banks, bro.
No, for real. It's definitely not Carlton Banks.
It's not Carlton 100%. Banks. It ain't the Grey Poupon. It's not trying to, demonstrate how different you are from everybody else who looks like you. It's what's lost, to be perfectly honest. I mean, like, I would identify black culture as jazz, like the Harlem Renaissance, the black arts movement, which to me had some degree of authenticity. It's gospel music, like Mahalia Jackson. It's like Whitney Houston.
That's definitely what I'd call. You're probably familiar with this term, cultural sort of production or creative production. So no, I definitely would call that African culture. Definitely, someone like Carlton Banks is. Yeah, no, he doesn't represent black culture. Definitely not. But there's something you said before, just a moment ago, about sort of that sort of southern redneck culture and perhaps some of those traits. Kind of making it up to the north. Some of the black people who perhaps look down on, the southern people, because you've had black people in the north for at least a couple of 100 years. In some cases, you had free men from like the 1700s, early 1800s, and some of their value systems of looking down on certain black people have been passed down, if that makes sense. So there's almost been like a continual cascade rather of that sentiment, if that makes sense. So it's like, oh, those people. So that's where some of the friction kind of may exist and sort of cut across or cut down. It's cut down the word. Essentially cascade down the generations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's what it is. Effectively, I don't think there's ever been like a uniform black identity, but as you said, stuff like the jazz music movement, and the other sort of art forms definitely are like a mediator, if you will. So different people from different elements of blackness can kind of converge and enjoy popular culture in that way. But the thing is, when you take popular culture out of the equation, it's questionable to what degree, black people are united or ever have been, if you take out popular culture.
Yeah. So, I would suppose, how connected, how together have black people ever been? You're talking about a group of people, man, who have, to one degree or another, at certain instances, been able to come together to fight for what they consider to be just. But then there are also moments and times when, the predominant culture will try to do everything it can to create fractionalization and disintegration. I mean, that's just part of what racism does.
Yeah.
You know, to keep people off of their toes and to adapt. You know, I always consider, you know, racism to be like stepping on a bubble in a carpet. You step on it in one place, okay, you flatten that. Well, it's just moved somewhere else and is taking on a different garb. It's a different kind of animal now. It's not played out in the exact same way as it was the last time. That's the reason why you got to make second half adjustments. To use a sports analogy, like if you're in a protracted struggle in order to maintain your dignity and to have some semblance of you know, pride and self-worth, then you know you have to be able to understand that the game has adjusted and to make the appropriate adjustments so you can compete again. But see, what black folks do is we like to rest on our laurels and think we've overcome. You know, like if you think that you've overcome, you never will.
Yeah.
You know, that's just my opinion, though. You know, maybe I could be wrong. Some people may, you know, think that I'm trying to race bait. I don't think I'm trying to race bait at all. I think the reality of race is a permanent feature and function of Western culture.
I agree.
And until it's stamped out. And the only way, you know, like a person like Frantz Fanon says that it will ever be stamped out is through violence.
Yeah.
There is no asking for respect. These people, especially from the descendants of Germanic tribes, they don't ask for respect. They take it. Now, and then they call it savage and uncivilized when other people do it, but it's precisely what they do.
Yeah.
They use force.
Yeah.
Bottom line, like all of the philosophy, all of the, you know, the erudition, you know, all of the philosophical acumen and all of that is just window dressing and justification for them to be able to exact power over others, man.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is, bro.
Yeah. I mean, with that soul book, I don't, for, you know, I have to be clear, I'm not sort of saying it's a panacea to explain the black experience at all. And, you know, other people would also make the distinction that there are differences between, for example, US black culture, whatever might be termed black culture in the UK, perhaps parts of France, although stuff like hip hop, you know, the hip hop culture has transcended America. But I understand that there are different diasporic struggles, so to speak. There are similarities and there are differences. And I think I might have seen someone make notes of the differences, you know, for example, African culture and black culture. I know they're not interchangeable. One has influenced the other. Even African culture in itself is quite broad. There's no, I mean, African consciousness is barely 100 years old. It's not that, you know, you understand what I'm saying? So
yeah, I get it.
American black culture has had some level of influence across the world, but obviously the way in which different black people, whether that's in the diaspora or whether that's in the continent, have sort of assimilated those influences is not going to be exactly the same. Even, for example, in the UK, you have many black people who don't make the distinction between the things that happened in America and what's happened in the UK. I mean, just say like the different types of what we'll call institutional racism in America is different. I don't think there's anywhere else, certainly not in the UK, which compares with it. Let me use a sports analogy again, right? Yeah.
So just imagine you're on a court, right? You playing basketball. You're on the black team, and another group of people are on the white team. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let me explain the analogy like this: all the white people are on the same team. All the black people are on the same team. Now you got different people playing different positions on the team, on the court, at different spots and places at the same time. Okay?
Yep.
So a center might be in the block. I don't know if you watch basketball, but it's an analogy I think that most people can get, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I'm following. I understand. Yeah.
So the center is playing a different game than the point guard. All right, the number one is playing a different game than the 5. The 4 is playing a different game than the 3. The 3 is playing a different game than the 2 to some extent, but they're all playing the same game. See, we can analyze and divide and talk about difference but there's still something similar. Like when you watch a basketball game, you don't say, well, the point guard has his own game, and like his game is more important than anybody else's position or part of the game. No, it's a global. The game is taking place on the entire court. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
The game, like, although there might be differences in what's happening on the court because there are different positions being played on that court, the game still is the white team is trying to beat the black team.
Yeah.
And right now, if we were to use an analogy, we're getting the brakes beat off of us.
100%. The issue
it doesn't matter if it's happening
to
at
extend
the
that
half court. It doesn't matter if the point guard is at the 3-point arc. If the 4 is down at the block, the center is coming up trying to run a screen. It's the same game.
No, I agree with you.
And they use different tactics.
Right? Like match fixing. To sort of build on that analogy, like match fixing, you can argue is one of them, where different black people, for example, see that they may have different effectively, if they renege from any sort of team dynamic, then they might gain on an individual level. So they might get some money outside of that game, which the other black people might not get. And then other people are thinking along similar lines, and so they can't really come together in some kind of cohesion.
The point is, if the people on the black team don't play as a team, they don't win the game. Because the white folks are playing, the white team is playing as a team. They've created whiteness. They've already picked the team. They've been playing with each other for a long period of time. They've even practiced with each other.
Yeah.
They've played the game with each other. Okay. Yeah. Now we're playing the game. And we're talking about where, my experience as a point guard is different than yours as a center. Is different than yours as a forward. Is different than yours as a shooting guard. We all understand that there's different experiences because no two people can have the same experience, right? It's impossible. Even twins can't have the exact same experiences because they can't be around the same time doing every interaction with the world. But the larger point I'm trying to make is, this man is from the fucking Antilles. He's from Martinique.
Yeah.
And he's writing about white black issues, right? And it pretty much rings true regardless as to what demographic you're talking about, if they're a part of the diaspora, if they've been colonized. Yeah, we're different. But what is the same is these white people got their foots on our necks.
Yeah, I don't disagree. The challenge that you have is that human nature is what I think explains the inability to sort of come together. A lot of these, when I say labels, obviously we share similar biologies and similar biology, similar ethnicities, similar culture to different degrees. But like I said, the ideology is the problem. And it's not, let me put it like this, different black people aren't always rational, if that makes sense.
Put it this way, you in the UK, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you get looked at as a black person in the UK, or you just looked at as a person in the UK? Do white folks in the UK see race, or is it just absolutely devoid as an experience or a concept in the UK?
There's extremes. So yeah, I would say for the most part, they definitely do see race. But then you've got instances where there's parts of the UK where their racism might not be passionate. If they have like a group of like an increasing presence of black people moving into their neighborhood, they would seek to kind of, how to say it, get familiar with them and establish that there's a level of trust, if that makes sense. So you've got extremes of racism in the UK. I would say for the most part, there is the seeing of color, if that makes sense. But then there are instances where there's an effort to try to almost look past it.
Do y'all all live together? Do you indiscriminately mate with one another? Is like any change in behavior amongst black folks there? Like you talk differently from one second to the next when you're with your homies as you do around people who are white? Like, I mean, or do you code switch in the UK? Or
there's code switching in the UK to different degrees. So it really depends on what environment you might be in. So certain people do different occupations, whether that might be corporate world or something to do with academia or something which might
I'm
be.
I'm just talking about white folks, man, from your own class.
Yeah.
Do you code switch? Or like, do you let your hair down when you're around black folks and you can be your true, authentic black self? Or do you talk to white folks the same way that you talk to black folks?
For the most part, I'm pretty consistent. I would say that I speak to everybody the same. I don't necessarily, shall I say, code switch. I mean, for example, I might use certain Creole terms with black people. If I said it to white people, wouldn't make any sense to them. But for the most part, I would say I speak the same. But you have some people who don't. It depends on the person and also depends on the area as well. So yeah, and I mean, even in terms of what is black in the UK, you have what you call multicultural London English. I mean, it's not spoken just in London, but it's spoken around the UK, and the base of that is like Jamaican Creole, or what some people might call patois, but there's obviously other influences from East London dialects as well. So it's a bit of a mix. So that's mostly what black people, I would say, mostly what black people speak. So it's a form of Creole, a form of Pidgin.
Right, but high class white people don't speak it, did it?
Well, this is what gets interesting. This is what's actually fun. You've got a mix of the high class. You've got high class people who do speak MLE, funnily enough, and then you have those who, to a degree, the higher up you go, there's almost a bit of a relaxed speech. There's certain people that I say upper class, but they're not upper echelon. They're almost like second tier. They overemphasize. They speak with what you call like RP, like received pronunciation, where they dot their I's, cross the T's properly, like, like they pronounce all their D's and stuff. But the people that are at the very top, they don't necessarily, they code switch, I'd argue, actually. They code switch. Like, for example, the royal family aren't as posh as the other aristocrats. They obviously are, to be
because they don't have anything to prove. Like
exactly.
Yeah, they have nothing to prove. They are the aristocracy. Whereas other people are like, kind of like imposters, performance imposters. So they have to be extra on guard. But all I'm trying to draw out of this is that there are some differences, but I mean, there are a lot of similarities, with Black diasporan experience, and how would Frantz Fanon be able to have a conversation about black women wanting to be with white men? And they don't care what the white man looks like. They don't care, about his social position. They just care that he's white, because then they're able to participate in whiteness vicariously. But then at the same time, when they get it, they still don't have the capacity to assimilate. And the same with this black fellow here. I mean, although it's a little bit different the way he goes about it. Yeah.
It's almost like sorry, go on.
But at the end of the day, the guy, Jean Venus, is suffering from neurosis. Now, he's not necessarily this way because of his race, but his race has something to do with it. Yeah. Okay? What does it have to do with it? Racism interacts with other factors to produce even more pronounced neurosis. This gene guy, his John guy, this personality and his desires interact with a racist society, and they produce his illness. His desires are conditioned by racist expectations. He questions his desire for a white woman, right?
Yeah.
And it's a result of, is it a result of love or a darker desire to get revenge on white society? Because, I want to conquer white women like, white men have conquered black women. And this is a theme that he foreshadows earlier on in the chapter. And I talked about how you see this in Eldridge Cleaver. I talked about how you saw it in Malcolm X. What is this? And when you get close to white culture, some people still have their doubts about whether or not they'll actually be fully accepted. Have you ever gone to dinner with white people? At their home?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Have you ever wondered whether or not you're actually accepted, or you're accepted only insofar as you're the token Negro who they can look at and say, I have a black friend?
So if we're going back to when I was younger, yeah, I think that I would definitely say that some of the white people I was friends with, they felt a certain level of what I call maybe street creds, or they felt like, yeah, look at me, you know, I'm cultured, I'm worldly, I'm not just a plain English or white person or whatnot. I have a bit of spice. So there was definitely that, because I mean, if I go back to when I was younger, just a brief sort of digression, but I used to organize parties, different types of club nights and stuff, and so that was where a lot of people would try to saddle up to me and befriend me and what have you. And yeah, that's how some of my initial friendships with them kind of developed. So yeah, there was an element of that, but then I would also say as well, I mean, I'm quite like a cerebral person. I'm quite intellectual and stuff. So then there was an element where it was like someone just attracted to the way that I think. So it wasn't. It was a bit of a mix. It depended on, you know, I would say that it was probably more like 70-30, 70% that token kind of like appeal, 30%, you know, genuine kind of interest and wanting to connect with me beyond, in quote, race, so to speak.
Well, I want to get some other people's take on what they thought
Yeah,
this
sure.
was about. So, Charlie Brown, I know you've been on hold for quite a bit of minute, man. You want to make a statement?
Yeah. I guess it reminded me of two things, Gigi. It's an article from the New Yorker, my great grandfather, Nigerian slave trader. And in the article, it described those African slave traders in Nigeria putting their sons and their daughters on the boats to go and study in England and other places, probably France and all over the place. So I was thinking, you know, as you read the article, that, you know, how did he get that privilege of not being sent, you know, into the Caribbean and America to be to go there and but I guess this article was written in 1921, so it wasn't even on the same time frame, but you know it showed a relationship between those African slave traders and what we have now.
Oh,
And
for
then
sure. Well, you know, like Fanon wrote "Black Skin, White Mask." Uh, when was the date that exact date that he
52,
published
I
this book?
think.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it was published. Oh, 52. Yeah, it was copyrighted in 52. So, you know, 9 years before he died, because he died in 61.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this stuff has been going on for quite a bit of time, man. It ain't like it's, you know, it's not like this whole thing has ended. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not as if this phenomena has, you know, totally gone away. But you know, I got an African friend, man. You know, he's a history professor, and he talks about, because he did grow up in Kenya, and you know, he thinks about like how carefree life was in Kenya, as opposed to in the life of his grandfather, as opposed to the kind of life that he lives and the kind of stresses that he's taking on by being, you know, in America as a professor. It's like, damn, I got all these bills and stuff. You know, like everything is like, I got to outsource all of what I need in order to, you know, provide for myself. Whereas my grandfather didn't have to do that. All he had to do was go, you know, get some game, go fishing, you know, and once he had enough, then he could, you know, relax. It wasn't like he was in a constant, you know, scramble to accumulate just to keep up. You know, but you know, he was educated in, you know, the European style, but he was a Kenyan, you know, original, you know, an indigenous, you know, native of Kenya. So the question becomes like, what value is there in European education, and does it create neurosis?
So it's all
You
a
know,
part about that I guess that the European, I guess the colonial project, it had been going on, like you said, even when these I guess these Igbo tribes were trading slaves. So it just showed that relationship and how, you know, even the education that we get now, you know, could be detrimental.
Right. So at the end of the day, I don't know, man. It's just all I wanted to do was say, look, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. We can talk about black women, but now we got to talk about black men and their desires and what are they actually doing when they partner and couple with white women. What is it they're trying to or attempting to do? Is it, to solidify that they've actually become cultured? They're not like one of the Negroes. And this is something white folks do, man. They'll tell you, well, you're different. Has a black white person ever told you that?
Oh yeah.
Like you're different.
Oh yeah.
Like different in what way? Like what do you mean I'm different? I treat everybody
pattern.
like an individual. You're not like the rest of. Well, what are the rest of them like? Like what do you know about them? Do you know anything about the rest of them? Have you come into contact with the rest of them? Like I mean, so those are some of the things that cross my mind, man. And look, I've gone to white schools. I ain't gonna say all my life, but I went to, a white high school. I went to a white graduate school. I went to all black college and I went to all black grade school. Okay. But I've always had contact with white people. There's never been a time when I've, during grade school, the students were all black. So I guess that gave me some sense of, what it is to actually be black. I have some contact with people of my own persuasion. But like what happens to a kid when like he's just raised around a bunch of white kids?
They end up falling in love with that white girl. And I've seen it so many times. Just like you said, elementary school, I was around in an all-black school. But by middle school, I was in a totally different environment with mixed classes. And by then, you got to observe a lot of other people and how they were influenced. And that they did pursue, the other group. And then the other thing it brought out was, how the mulattoes could be used, I guess that mulatto group of people, how they were used as like a buffer class, and, all the time. How they, like Denmark Vesey, that mulatto group of people, they ended up, giving more details about how, about the slave revolt that was going on, and they crushed the slave revolt because of that group of people. So them being used as a buffer class, and then us just playing into it by being ignorant.
Yeah, it's a lot of mess, man. The truth is, I know it. You care to make a comment, sir?
Yeah, I do. I really appreciate this live stream. It's been pretty fascinating. It did remind me of hearing Eldridge Cleaver speak about his experience with white women, how black men looked at white women, and it was so shocking the way he wrote that. You think, this man, come on, man, you bullshit, man. Do you really believe that? And you hear it in these other sources, and you tend to think, yeah, they do think that way. And I agree that part of that is with us today, and and that's part of that black male experience that that we all have to contend with in one form or another. And so I'm a black man and I'm married to a white woman, and so I haven't really experienced it in the way what's his name, Frantz has experienced it, or Eldridge Cleaver. It's been a little bit different, but I would say that what it looks like to me to be a black man in America, the way it works is that people really try to tell you more about your experience, more than we're able to share to the world what our experiences are. Now, maybe we do through rap music and through jazz music, through entertainment, through literature. There are some pipelines, but we really don't write our own story in a lot of ways. We've got European culture, you've got white supremacy trying to really stomp us out, and then when we do speak our minds and we do stand up, I mean, either they try to shut you up, or they meet you with bullets, or they burn your house down. There's a long history of that we're all aware of, and I think and one of these things too is part of the problem is the concept of being a black man. The concept of being a black man is it's really connected to struggle, right? And that's why you say you were saying earlier about what's his name, guy from Fresh Prince. What's his name? Carlton Banks. And you go, Carlton, that's not authentic black. And then, see, I don't know if you saw that meme recently that came out where he goes, the black community doesn't support me because I'm with a white woman. Right? Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. So there's a meme that was going around. So I actually Googled the interview and actually read what he said. And he didn't necessarily say that, but what he said was that, because I was Carlton Banks, because I'm with a white woman, he goes, I'm being rejected by my own community. He goes, white folks don't really accept me and black people don't accept me. And
that's the dilemma,
That's the dilemma. But I would say this too, though. A lot of black people who've got a black wife and black children, and they don't feel. A lot of black people who are with black women don't feel accepted by the black community. And one reason, like why you're saying Carlton, he's not authentic black, it's because, of course, he's a caricature. He's not like a real person. He's a caricature of a black man, and that caricature is a well-dressed. He speaks the King's English. He's well educated. He's really nice. He doesn't have a lot of real problems in his life because he comes from money, and that sort of reduces his blackness. So, because we all know that the concept of blackness is inherently tied to slavery, it's tied to white supremacy. So, the further you go up the social economic hierarchy, you sort of lose your blackness in a sort of way, because that's the structure of racism. And and I think we all know that to be true. But then I think where we do miss out, and one thing that we know is true, you hear it and you go, that's true, but a lot of people don't talk about it because we go, well, that's too taboo. You can't say that. I mean, we know it's true, but other people don't believe it. You and I know it's true, but they don't believe it. And that's the fact that the concept of race itself, the biological concept that there's black people and white people, the biological concept that says all people around the planet who've got a African phenotype, meaning dark skin and very arbitrary facial features, all you guys throughout time and history, that's all one group called black. I mean, that's laughable. That's laughable on its face. And then when you do the DNA test and they go, oh, well, Africans actually have more diversity than anybody else in the world. As a matter of fact, Africans have more diversity than everybody else combined. So to say that Africans are one ethnic demographic or one group called race, that's silly talk, man. Come on, man. That's a pseudoscience. And of course, the human genome says that.
Yeah, it always has been.
Right.
But my response to that is, race is a construct. It was created by Europeans in order to create a justification for the material exploitation of, people that they subjected to colonialization and slavery. That's what it was. Okay. So they needed a justification for it so as not to have to endure cognitive dissonance. And so that's what they did. But I mean, like a person like, Charles Mills, I read his work called The Racial Contract. He would call it inverted epistemology, like where you have to see the world in a way that's not real. Right. And you have to prevent yourself from knowing certain facts about the world in order to, persuade yourself that, what you consider to be real, it doesn't match up to the lived experiences of most people. Okay. But at the end of the day, we're not all one. But one thing I do know is that, in relation to the way we're treated, we are in that regard, a political bloc. And, they're counting on the diversity. They're counting on, the differences. They're counting on, the cleavages between us to prevent us from being able to resist against it. And so that's why, they created the Negritude movement. They created Pan-Africanism. They created, the Black Power movement, because it was a response to white racism. As silly and ridiculous and constructed as it is, it has real material consequences on this planet. It determines who gets paid, who gets educated. It determines, who lives longer, who's incarcerated. It determines a lot of things. Now, you know,
This,
you might be that.
right. But this
Yeah,
is the crux of the issue, though, and this is why uh, so many. This is why it's what was the term that you're using? All this neurosis. That's why there's all this neurosis, because we know that it's biologically that race is a fallacy, but it's definitely a socio-political construct that's very real in that way and has a heavy impact on individuals and large demographics of people. So here's the issue then. So if Black people, if African Americans, if the Ados tribe, that's what tribe I come from, is that Ados tribe. If we gain power and we move up the socioeconomic ladder and we become well educated and homeowners and we're balling out of control in America, then what we find is a lot of Black men like OJ and others, they go, I'm not Black anymore. I'm rich. I'm paid. Anton on the Lapeef show, he sort of said that, like, it's like when you have more money and you could vote, you can buy firearms, you got multiple properties, you got $400,000 in your retirement, when you're in your early 40s and you feel like you've made it into America. For a lot of people, they go, I'm not that Black, because Black is a lot of time is connected to struggle. So then when a guy like Carlton is not connected to the struggle, we could poke fun and make fun of that caricature, but that causes a neurosis in itself. And we got to be careful with that, because now what we're saying is that when Black people become more powerful, and white supremacy, which really, like, black people and white people, they go together. I know people hate to hear that, but in the system of white supremacy, it's not like white people and Black people are opposites. They're opposites, but it's opposites on two sides of the same coin. And as soon as Black people start to go up that hierarchy, and that socioeconomic hierarchy, that literally means that white supremacy is dead. And we're starting to kind of see that. And white people are becoming, for the most part, we're having these large social movements are becoming less racist. So then you see more interracial dating, more interracial marriage. We see more Black men are having more success than ever before. And so it does cause this neurosis, because you say, well, I still want to be Black, and and I want to be connected to Black culture, and I want to help out in the struggle. But then what do you do when the struggle is not there anymore?
Then I would point to, I'm a racial realist. Some people think we're going to get past this by interbreeding. I don't see it. I've seen countries where there's been deep interbreeding, like Mexico and Brazil, more so, in fact, than in the United States, right? But all they did was created more and more mulatto classes. All they did was come up with more definitions of what happens in between. And even if you get a lot of bread, man, even if you become wealthy, like this whole notion that, like, the richer you get, the less Black you are, because the less struggle you have to suffer. Like, white people will make you have a nigger moment in a moment, especially if they don't know who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so Oprah Winfrey went to, some Swedish, I don't know, was it a Louis Vuitton store, Prada store, something like that. And she wanted to see an expensive handbag. And the clerk at the store was like, no, you can't see that one. That's not one you can afford. You know what I'm saying? Or it can happen like to Skip Gates, the Harvard professor. Like, okay, I'm trying to get into my own house. I'm breaking in my own house. And the police was like, so what? We about to arrest your ass anyway.
The beer,
or you could be like the young little kid, or what's his name? The kid with the Skittles, man. I don't know what. Trayvon Martin. He was a middle class kid. He was going to buy Skittles. You know what I'm saying? And then you got some, Latino guy who's supposed to be guarding this block, identifies him as a problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter if you got a suit on or you got your pants sagging. I mean, one could argue, the people intimately, that can create a difference. But to the average observer, you know what I'm saying, especially like to the police, that shit don't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, we mistake a group of people being able to actually have access to material wealth as somehow eliminatory of this phenomena across the board. right? And
I
you
don't
know,
think people. I don't think people do that. Well, hold on. They do got. There are some guys on YouTube. They say some wild shit like that. I mean, but in real life, man, I never met anybody like that. And I live in Oregon. It's like the interracial dating capital of the world. They say it's Minnesota. I don't think so. I see most black men that I see are with non-black women, particularly white, and are very happy. See it all the time. And it looks crazy. I got a white wife, and it looks crazy to me. I go, God damn, what keeps happening? Why does this keep happening?
well, you know, I
I
think
know
you
why.
know,
You know, we talk about why, but it's pretty
yeah,
wild.
I think you got like, well, you know, because of one, you know, the racial neurosis that black folks have experienced all throughout the world, man. I mean, you know, black and white people are naturally going to couple anyway. That's just the way of the humanity. Okay, sex is going to happen between the races. It always has happened. It always will happen. I mean, the way the white men tried to safeguard white women is proof positive of the fact that it just happens. It's a natural occurrence,
They
right?
make laws against it.
But the problem is when people pursue those relationships because they have an internalized sense of inferiority, or they suffer from some sort of psychosis where they're trying to prove that they're just as good as somebody that's white. That's the issue. You see what I'm saying? Because you can't. I think what Fanon is trying to articulate is that if that's your overriding concern, and if that's an unconscious motivation or a drive, or even a conscious drive, then you're not really in love with that person. That person is giving you access to something based on something neurotic to begin with. Now, if it's just a natural occurrence and there's no psychosis behind it, okay, go ahead and have at it. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, you know, in order to prove that, you know, you're better than the other darkies, and you know, I'm close to whiteness now. I finally arrived because I have a white partner. One can argue that's kind of sick. Because I mean, because the reality of the world is that, you know, just people are people. Like, I mean, you know, you got good and bad white folks. You got good and bad black folks.
That sounds like
you have smart, you have ugly and beautiful black people, and you got ugly and beautiful white people.
Hey, do you remember what Eldridge Cleaver said in Soul on Ice? Can you repeat what he said in that book?
Say it.
He said, I used to practice raping the R word, black women, so I could get good at raping white women.
Yeah, that's Soul on Ice.
So yeah, that's it. Yeah, he said that he used to practice so he could do that, so he could get revenge. And then he was saying later on in the book that he had a thirst and a lust where he really wanted to be with white women. What I read the book, I'm like, I was thinking to myself, come on, man, this can't be true, man. He's just trying to make money sitting in the penitentiary writing this shit. This sounds too crazy. But again, you start to hear this in different sources, then you say, well, maybe that's true. And then maybe I can't really fathom something like that in my mind, but I didn't, you know, he's coming out of probably born in the 1930s or so. So he had to deal with a lot of pressure in a much more brutal, racially brutal environment that I couldn't imagine. You can't really imagine it unless you experience it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the same with like Malcolm X. He had a white girlfriend, you know, and you know, he treated her badly. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and in his mind, he was paying white folks back for what had happened to black women. You know, it's revenge, you know, in a sense. So I'm just saying that the mentality is out there, man. I'm not saying that, like, you know, you specifically harbor this sentiment at all, right? It's just, but it's not like it's a unique sentiment. It's not. I mean, like, you can, man, look, here's the reality of the world, man. People conquer lands, right? And one of the spoils of war is the women.
Right.
Am I wrong or am I right about this shit? Like, if we're going to be straight up no chaser, let's tell it straight no chaser.
Okay.
Right or wrong?
Right.
Think about what the spoils of war are and what you get in relation to privilege in terms of access to sex. Like either we can continue to play this effeminate bullshit game with each other about who's civilized, who's not, who's actually alpha, who's not. Like the alphas are the people who conquer other people and get to fuck their women.
True. Dr.
Like,
Gigi.
are we gonna,
Can I give it to you straight, no chaser?
Give it to me
straight.
It
ain't a one-way road. Sexual conquest and dominating another man's woman and those men and men having neurosis over that is not a one-way street. Now, I'm not saying
I'm not
saying you are. I'm just saying it. I'm just, trying to give you a good live stream. So that's why, I'm saying it like that. But think about this now. I've got a theory for you. Now, I've talked to people about this. I've been really looking at this, and I'm going to lay this on you. I think you're going to appreciate this because it's just not black men that go through this. Now, imagine, the average white dude. He might be a Generation X or a baby boomer. White dude, and he was, you know how it is, Dr. Gigi. A lot of these white boys were raised to be racist, raised to hate black people, calling people the N-word. They're hearing it in the home. They're hearing it in their school. And then turns out, that their favorite basketball players are black. Their favorite football players are black. Their favorite music is black. Their favorite actors are black. Damn, the president is black. And then, they go out and then they actually meet some black guys and they're great friends. They become friends, right, with black dudes. And yet they still harbor this racism inside because culture did that to them. They were acculturated to be racist. They're born in a white supremacist slave colony. Of course they're racist, but they still have this affinity for black people. So now they have this psychological split where they've been taught to hate black people, but then at the same time, they've learned to love black people. Well, what you see here is something called cuckolding. You're familiar with cuckolding. Well, they got this whole genre of interracial cuckolding where white men who do not feel comfortable with themselves and their own racism, and they don't know how to deal with it, they end up offering their wives to black men. They offer their girlfriends to black men and watch black men, the BBC fetish, and they're plowing their wife in their bedrooms, and they get pleasure out of this. And that's that type of neurosis that also affects white men. It just may come out in a different way. And so, I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, they want to be dominated. They fetishize, the other. And, that could be just, like you said, that could be just as neurotic, the other way around. So, I mean, but I think this just goes back to, because, a lot of what Fanon is doing is borrowing from Hegel's master-slave dialectic. I don't know if you have any experience or any understanding of it, but it's basically, you got two subjects that come into contact with each other, and they become mutually, dependent on each other. So, like the black needs the white needs the black. The white needs a nigger, okay? And the slave needs the master. Their identities are like I think Charlie Brown said, it's two sides of the same coin. You know what I'm saying?
About black and white, exactly.
So it gets to the point where, like, the master can't even do shit on his own. He needs the labor of the slave, and then he forgets how to do the basic functions. You like a perfect show that kind of like demonstrates this is the Undercover Boss. You ever see that TV show?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, good show.
Where you got like all of these bosses sitting in these offices, these air-conditioned offices, and then they have all these workers who are supposed to be fulfilling all the tasks that these bosses have developed in the comfort of, of their offices. And then when they finally have to come to the ground and do the work, they can't even do it. And then they realize how hard it is. Like, damn, I didn't know this shit was that hard. Yeah, it's hard. Like flipping burgers, I don't know if you ever done it in your life, man. That shit is some hard ass work, bro. You know what I'm saying? Serving food all day and rushing to have to do it, that's a high pressure job. Now one can argue, okay, well, it's from the neck down job, and from from the neck up, it's more valuable because it's more cerebral, and we give precedence to the cerebral, and it's more rewarding, and it's more, people get remunerated more for it because not everyone can think at that level. But I mean, come on, man, that's just a justification for exploitation, to be perfectly honest, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not trying to be ignorant, but come on, man. Like, you want people to be able to do what you yourself cannot do. So at any rate, the master-slave dialectic is that, both of these people become dependent on each other in order to formulate their own identities, okay? And to sustain their own identities. And it's sick, it's depraved. So the question is, how do you resolve it? How do you get out of it, huh?
Dr. Gigi, that was precisely what I was trying to get at. As a society, not just as a black person or a black man, or a black woman, but just as a society. I mean, how much death and destruction does this pseudoscience of race cause? A lot of European Americans are about done with this shit too. A lot of black people were just done with race and racism and all this. And that doesn't mean we want to lose our culture and our identity and our tribe. It's not that, but it doesn't have to be brutal. And these baby boomers, they got one foot in the grave, man. Us Generation Xers were the next generation. So I think it's important that we allow ourselves space to push back on the concept of what it means to be black identity, the concept of race. Is even the concept of race valid? Why are we using it in the ways that we do? And having, you being a philosopher, you most certainly understand this better than I do, and in ways to kind of deconstruct these cultural institutions, these socio-political institutions that really don't serve very many people well. Maybe, the white supremacists, maybe, you got some people, some conservatives, white conservatives, maybe they're into it, and people want to preserve their white identity or and black identity in some ways. But in a lot of ways, man, we got to attack this way. And I think it's possible. Now, you're never going to eradicate all racism. That's just not going to happen. But I mean, we could really turn the corner on this if we have these type of frank conversations and get in the mud, right? And and serve that food, right? You get on your hands and knees and you work in the dirt, in your garden, right? And you're in the garden, you want to beautify your garden. It gets ugly, it gets dirty. You're going to get mud on your hands. Well, I think that's kind of what we need to do in these racial conversations. And so I really appreciate this work that you're doing, Dr. Gigi. This has been a great live stream.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that, man. Like a person like Frantz Fanon is going to say, like, you're like, so there's some people who are orientated towards this discourse and, like just having conversations and stuff like that. Fanon is like, that's not going to work, man. Like, it just is not. You're going to have violence. That's the only way, I mean, this is Fanon, you know what I'm saying? Like, and maybe I'll do, the wretched of the earth, but, so this is why, like Karl Marx eventually thought that workers, because they're exploited, would eventually basically, create a revolution and, create communism. That's what he thought, okay? And all of this was based on Hegel's slave master dialectic. Because, look, you got two subjects that come into contact with each other. You got like the master and the slave, right? The master is recognized by the slave as his master, and the master recognizes the slave as a subordinate who is suffering what he is because of the pain of potential death that looms over his head if he doesn't fulfill the master's wishes. But what happens is the master becomes dependent on the slave for the recognition as to being superlative, to being better, right? But because the slave is working for the master, the slave begins to shape things up for the master. He's actually working. The master's not working. He doesn't have any contact with nature because the slave is doing the work for him. But as the slave creates more and more through the sweat of his brow and with greater and greater, intricacy and complexity, he's beginning to see himself reflected in the things he's creating. And he realizes, okay, I'm the one that did this. So the slave is not alienated from his own work, his labor. And he becomes self-conscious, right? That's what Hegel calls it, self-consciousness. But the master has become wholly dependent on the slave. So ultimately what's supposed to end up happening is the slave, because he's brought to greater awareness of his own agency, he's supposed to be able to resolve, the conflict or the unequal relationship by, basically just committing an act of violence or some shit like that, right? He begins to basically understand that I don't have to beat to this guy's drum anymore. I have a greater level of sophistication than even the master. But like that all of this is theoretical. You know what I'm saying? It's not, but ultimately, like somebody like Fanon is gonna say, if you're colonized, violence is already occurring because of that colonization. It's already there. Precisely. If because it can only be maintained through violence. You can't have a colony without having troops there, without having like judges there, without having police there. It's impossible. You can't do it. You can't have a colony without having your troops there. And that's violence. If you're colonized, violence is everywhere, okay? It might parade around as justice or law and order, but it's actually force, okay? So Fanon is gonna say, well, if that's the case, then why are you not being violent yourself? Because that's the only way to get that force out of your way.
Well, I think that's what I'm saying, Dr. G. I think that's precisely what I'm saying. I think that's what that's what his book is. His book is violence. This conversation is violence. Those Black Lives Matter protests with all those people all throughout the world, that is a form of violence. All violence doesn't have to be guns and bullets and necessarily bloodshed. And I think part of this is as Black men using this intellectual violence where we penetrate people's minds with ideas and concepts and really push back on their belief systems, make them question themselves in a deep-rooted way. Like a man like yourself, a PhD who's got a strong Black identity, a proud Black man sitting on a philosophical PhD in philosophy. Yo, man, that
don't mean
tank,
shit to these
man.
people, man. Like you're
a tank. So what I'm saying is in this conversation, I'm saying that coming up with ideas and really start to that's kind of what the manosphere is. It's a form of violence against the gynocracy per se. But this thing can grow tentacles in ways that we can't imagine right now. And I think that's what I'd like to see, like guys like yourself start to produce and more of that in the manosphere, man. I really think we're on to something here.
Well, all I can do is just present information. Like, I'm not even telling you what I think personally about a lot of stuff. Some of the stuff I am, but some of the stuff I kind of pull back from. Like this, I'm pulling back from to some extent. But what I will say about it is, at the end of the day, if you love somebody, and I'm referring back to his earlier statement, Frantz Fanon's, like if you love somebody, it has to be authentic, and it should be free of neurosis. Like I shouldn't love somebody because they're white. That's like I shouldn't want to get close to a woman because she's white. There have to be other like redeeming qualities and values that this person has in order for me to be with her and attracted to her. Just being with her because, well, I don't like them Black women, so I'm gonna go find me a white one.
Exactly.
That's the reason why I did this, to be perfectly honest. Like, and it's one thing to say, well, okay, well, I'm being treated better. I'm acknowledged as a human being better than my own people. Okay. And that could be the case. Okay. It could very well be the case. But, Black women got some work to do on their own. And to be perfectly honest, they live in a cultural environment where they're not required to do that work. And that's the only issue. Like they're not required to do any kind of work in order to deal with the neurosis that comes from racism. I mean, they've created like enclaves amongst themselves that paint themselves as nothing more than victims. But a lot of times they're doing what Frantz Fanon is basically accusing them of. Like, you have a self-deprecating attitude. And so therefore you think that what's best is what's white. But these people, man, you're never going to be them. You're not going to be white. By definition, you're anti-white. You are the producers, to be perfectly honest, of niggers. You're nigger factories. This is what, like, I'm not even trying to be ignorant. I'm not even trying to be ignorant by saying that, right? I'm not.
Factual. Dr. Gigi, lay it on us, man. Give us your real thoughts on this. Please do. Please be frank.
I just said it.
All right, I'm keep going. Like, I love it, man. Keep going.
No, I'm not trying to even be ignorant, man. Like, I didn't create the terms of this. You know, like, I mean, like, white men, like, they never had a problem screwing black women. That's apparent. That's abundantly apparent. But they don't wife them. Not for real. You can look at the data. They don't wife black women. They never have. They take them to the bushes. They make them to jump off and throw them away. And then say, look, that's my son. Okay, well, you know, that motherfucker's, he ain't one of us. You know what I'm saying? It's just the way it is. I didn't make the rules of this. I didn't create this twisted, sick-ass system. All I can do is evaluate it and look at it for what it is.
GG.
So if you feel, even as a black man, if you feel that you're going to be accepted in white society because you got a white wife, I guarantee you, I don't know what area of the country you live in, but I'm pretty sure, like, if it's a whole bunch of interracial couples, then it looks less, strange. But like, if you're in an area where, it ain't all that common, people gonna look at you like, Like, don't you sometimes get some crazy looks and some shit?
Very rarely, and
have you?
And
though?
Never from white men. That's the crazy part. Never from white men. But you got to understand, I live in Portland, and it's different out here. A lot of racial violence in the 80s. The average black man from Portland is like sitting like on a PhD in racism. Everybody knows what the what is. We've seen plenty of racial violence, like beating the shit out of white boy after white boy and putting him in hospitals. That's kind of, I mean, they got Measure 11, like they know out here. So, and then it's so crazy because a lot of white women are into black men. So out here, it's the West Coast, man. It's Portland's a liberal city. So you're not going to get a lot of faces, but that doesn't mean you're not going to deal with racism. You're most certainly going to see racism. You're never really going to be totally accepted. That's going to be impossible. Now, you could be accepted by individuals, but by the masses, like in an everyday way, of course not. And having a white woman, that's not going to protect you from that at all. Now, that it may give you a little buffer here or there, maybe in certain instances, but not too much at all. No.
Well, shit, in the past, that shit'll get you lynched.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, it's become more acceptable. But, you know what they call white women to fuck with black men, man.
Right.
You know what they call them? Nigga lovers. We got to be real about this. Like, if we're going to be straight no chaser, we're going to be straight no chaser. You know what I'm saying?
They call them wiggers in my school, GG. And the driver in a lot of these
coal
relationships is wealth, money. The person with the money is go drive the culture of the relationship. And we know that they hold most of the wealth. So especially here and in this era, and I was the driver even then that created, they use it, speaking of violence, they use money as violence. And
hell yeah, man. Economics is like, I think Marx perfectly demonstrates that, like economics can be violence. Keeping people in a state of destitution and scrambling, like exploitation. And look, I'm not asking for everybody to receive the same thing, but I think at least Marx did demonstrate that like exploitation does take place, in capitalist systems. I mean, if you don't acknowledge that, like if you think that everybody gets their just due based on their efforts, you're a goddamn fool to me. Because that's just not true. And then, like, first of all, like I was gonna write a thesis on this. Like my first you know, thoughts about writing a dissertation was going to be, you know, the deserving poor, which is a double entendre. On the one hand, the poor deserve to be poor because they haven't worked hard enough. But then on the other hand, one could argue that the poor deserve to be remunerated for the condition that they're in. So I was going, you know, compare and contrast the liberal and the conservative American perspective, because those words mean different things elsewhere throughout the world. But I was going to compare and contrast those viewpoints. But at the end of the day, the very idea that you could determine what someone deserves based on what they've done is absolutely ridiculous to me. But that's because I'm a philosopher, right? And I know what deserve means, and I know you can't measure it. Like, how do you measure what someone deserves? How do you measure the effort somebody put into something other than the time that they put into it? And then, even if you take two different people and they put the same amount of time into something, you don't always get the same results. Like, I might work harder at something than you do, but you have the natural aptitude for it more so than I do. And so you're able to actually, you know, merit the reward. Like, I mean, like say, for example, someone who can sing. Like, I'm not a singer, dog. I can never sing like fucking Luther Vandross or like Michael Jackson or like whoever, you know, like Isley. I'll never be, look, I could take 1,000 voice lessons and shit and try to do that. These people have a natural aptitude. So, like Jimi Hendrix on the guitar, I heard somebody make reference to Jimmy. Like, I can try to do that shit for 5 to 10 years, and I still might not be able to actually garner that skill the way he was, right? So desert, like the amount of effort and energy you put into something doesn't necessarily have anything to do with performance, right? Or what you ought to be rewarded. If you got the skill and the talent, you ought to get the reward. It just is what it is. And it's unfortunate, but people go about making this conflation like, okay, just because somebody's wealthy or something like that, they really work hard for it. That's a lie, man. You can work hard as a motherfucker and be unsuccessful. Period, bruh. Like,
It happens all the time.
It happens every day, man.
Right.
But I mean, we conflate hard work with success. And look, one can argue some people don't have to work hard at all and they're successful. It's just the way it is. I'm not trying to be ignorant about it, you know, but it's just the way it is. But like the system we live in it conflates this idea that, like, okay, there's virtue in being successful. The pretext is, the implication is you had to work hard to get it. And it's just a lie. And this is why I call the bullshit out, man. I try to tell people, man, that's just a lie, man. It's a lie. Stop capping with this shit. Let's tell the whole truth about it. Let's not just, come with these Horatio Alger stories and shit. Like, I mean, it does happen. It's noble when it does happen. But, like, that's just not the normal course of things, man. Some people are born with different talents, man. Like, you ever see a little 3 or 4 year old boy, like, on YouTube, and this motherfucker playing the shit out of the piano? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
That's not something that you could force a kid into doing. You can't make some kid be able to do that. Can't.
It's true. And I would say it can be true. It can be true that you can work your ass off, you can be smart, you can put the time in, and you might not have economic success. It happens all the time. People start business after business after business, and they're doing their best, and it just doesn't work out. But then there's other people who they start a business, and they got a I don't know, they just got some firm that they run, and they're making a lot of coin off some business. So it can happen for some individuals, but the reality is that a lot of wealth is a hand-me-down wealth. But especially like for Black boys, I was reading an article in the New York Times about this. I thought this was fascinating. They said that the biggest predictor of Black boys is living in a community with black fathers in the home at like 60-something% or higher. But they said, but the problem is there's only 2 counties in the country where that happens, which is frightening. And they said, but for white men, they said that's like 60-something% of the counties. So, and they said furthermore, which I thought was actually frightening, they said that statistically, a black boy that's raised in a single parent home, raised with a single mom, but lives in a community with black boys, where black fathers are in the home at like 60%, is gonna that the kid from the single parent home is gonna have more success than a black boy on average, than a black boy who lives with his dad in a single parent home community. And so when you look at how society is structured that way, this notion of free will, and science kind of proves that we don't have as much free will as we think we do, because the way the environment shapes us and our peer groups shape us, and those cultural expectations. And then, you kind of doubt yourself and lose confidence, and, just socioeconomic problems, or getting into drugs and in athletics or whatever. You kind of you're wasting your free time away. So what you're saying is very real, but then at the same time, there's something that we can do about this. And I think, again, like what I love about this conversation is you're really pushing back on this narrative. You're challenging black men. You're going and you're saying, don't get with a white girl because she's white. I mean, that's neurotic, and all that's gonna do is create failure in your life. And I think like part of this too is saying that like we actually have the power, like what Black Lives Matter did. I think this is brilliant what they did. A brilliant slogan, Black Lives Matter. And what the black community has done is held them up a mirror to white folks with these videos, with these cell phone videos, with these blogs that people write, where we talk about where white people start to see themselves through the eyes of black people. That's very powerful. So now it's like, so they see themselves through our eyes, and now they're starting to tear all these Confederate statues down, and I don't want to be white anymore, and I need to give money and donate, and I want to sign up for a CRT class and all this, which is a good thing. And I think we need to like triple down on that. I think black women are doing a better job of organizing and leading some of this, but I think as black men, we need to really put these seeds, and really create like cultural warfare, mimetic warfare, a war of ideas, where we insert our needs and what we desire in this world, in this country, into the minds of white people and European Americans, but do it in a way that's more cryptic, where it is a form of violence, where we're operating in a way where we're planting seeds that's going to shape the way they see the world, but not necessarily. You don't have to do it, in an angry, aggressive, loud way. I mean, if it works, it works. But there's also more subtle ways of doing that. And I think that those are the type of things that really interest me, and I'm kind of hearing that in this conversation a little bit.
For sure. I got, like me and Sandog talked about this, man, and everybody has their role to play, man. Like everybody's not going to be a warrior. You know what I'm saying? Like that's why you got, people who are analysts and they do more thought, and propaganda kind of work. Like, I mean, even Hitler had a propagandist, because like Sandog said, you got hard power and you got soft power. You can't just have it. It just is not violence. You got to have, propaganda and violence coupled together. So, your work might be as a propagandist. Some other people might be like, okay, well, we're going to defend ourselves against the violence that you are imposing on us. Or, it's just like, I liken it like a chessboard, man. Every piece has its own role to play. And everything, every piece can't just be the same and do the same thing. Otherwise, the game has no meaning. It's no significance, right?
Chessboard.
Right.
This notion of not being violent,
if we playing checkers, then we playing checkers. I don't think you know anybody
who's put more white people in the hospital. I don't think you know more white people. No, I don't think you know a black man who's put more white people in the hospital. So I know you hear my voice and maybe the things I talk about. You go, he don't sound like he's violent. Man, I grew up in Portland in the 80s, man. Like we got a reputation out here. People know. As a matter of fact, there's a reason why white folks don't call you the N-word anymore. I mean, it wasn't just here. The reason white people don't call us the N-word anymore is because black dudes were beating the shit out of white folks for saying that. I've seen it with my own two eyes a whole lot of times. So, black men being violent, I mean, we're good at that. The reason we're here is because we're good at violence. It's been a matter of survival for us. It's probably affected our epigenetics and our DNA. So, we're big, we're strong. We tend to be aggressive or when need be. We're good at sports. I think this kind of reflects the type of brutality that has forced us to defend ourselves in violence in a fight for survival. So when I look at, there's this physical violence, and that you got to have that to defend yourself, but that psychological violence, the pen is mightier than the sword, as they say.
I hear you, man. But one thing I'll say about this though, and it's often never said, right? So there's an argument, that goes around, over and over again about how white women are going to treat you better than like black women, right? And that may be true, right? To some extent, if you find that like culturally black women are just aggressive, acerbic, and in a nutshell, kind of masculine, right? So if it's the case that you think that's true, like you think like these white women don't have the ability to flip the switch and turn on a motherfucker? Like, let's not lose sight of the fact the Red Pill as a movie and men's rights activism as like a movement, it was started by some white dudes, man. We talking about Colin Farrell, Paul Elam, and I forget a few the other guys' names, but they've been doing this shit. And what they've been talking about is the way men get fucked over with child support and the way they get fucked over with divorce. Because they've been going through the shit for quite a bit of time. I'm just saying, like, I mean, so it ain't like, like black men are the only people experiencing this shit, but I mean, in greater numbers to some degree. And it has more of a sting to us because it's hard for us to bounce back. But damn, man, Paul Elam, man, have you listened to his YouTube streams?
I never heard of Paul Elam. No,
man, you got to go listen to that dude's shit, bro. Paul Elam.
I'll check him out.
Like a lot of people talk about Red Pill, they ain't even seen the fucking Red Pill movie.
I've seen part of it. I saw part of it.
That kills the shit out of me. Like, and then some people will say, well, I'm Red Pill. And the motherfuckers ain't even seen the movie. Like, you could say Paul Elam. I'm not taking a dig at you, but you could say Paul Elam, and a motherfucker will never have listened to any of his shit. Ever. And I'm like confused. Like, them motherfuckers laid this, and I'm not saying black men haven't been doing, the same kind of thinking. But I mean, in terms of the name of this shit, like, white men been going through this shit too. The divorce cleans their clocks too. The child support cleans their clocks. Domestic violence, like Johnny Depp and that white chick, man, who was fucking, who was that white chick, man, that basically came out on tape, audio tape. Like, I wasn't punching you, I was just hitting you and all that bullshit. Amber Heard. So it's,
let me give you my observations on that with white women and black men. Because you see me in the chat, man. I kind of troll in the chat a little bit. And, I'll say nobody loves black men more than white women, right? And it's kind of tongue in cheek. I kind of mean it basically from my experience. There's so many white women in America that, they're the largest demographic of people. So there's a lot of white women that will date and are healthy and want to get with black men for the best intentions. It's been my experience. Of course, I haven't done a study and I don't know all white women, but from my experience, that's what I've seen. And so what I found is that there's a lot of racist white women that will call the cops on you, that you can't trust. They'll try to flunk you out of school. They'll get you fired from your job. You can't trust white women. You cannot trust white women, not as a demographic and barely as individuals. So, it sounds a little bit conflicting there, but I think, but life is there's a lot of conflicts and hypocrisies in life. And I think that's just one of them. So what I found is that as a black man, when with white women, that a white woman who will get married to you or start a family with you, as long as she's comes from a good home and she's healthy, she's gonna have to really want to be with you because she knows the stigma of being with a black man. I mean, she might not verbalize it and say, "Oh, this is gonna be so bad and horrible," but she's not racially ignorant. She doesn't know that she's gonna take a hit in some ways, and I think I was talking to this one of my friends. He's works down in L.A. He's a pretty successful guy, and he was married to. This is what he said about black women and non-black women. He's married to a Latina, and he goes, the difference between black women and non-black women is that non-black women will listen to you and not give you pushback and try to argue you down. You talk to a black woman, and they try to push back on your experiences. And I think, like with white women, they tend to listen to your experiences. And so once they listen, they start to internalize kind of what you go through. So they kind of understand the gravity. So I think what comes with this is this buy-in that if I'm going to deal with him, and I'm going to have to deal with that. So I kind of have to read up. I've got to read books. I got to understand the culture. I don't want to have my N-word wake-up call. So these are things that I have to deal with. And, so I think that a lot of times that when white women do get with black men, from what I see, a lot of times these relationships are very strong. They're very healthy. They work out, and she might not be the hottest. She might not be the most educated. She might not, whatever it is. But a lot of times they do make good partners for black men. Now, if you don't, if you, like you were saying earlier, you get with them for the wrong reasons, and you're just trying to get with a white woman because she's white, because you want to get back with black women. Well, you're probably most certainly going to find the wrong type of white woman, because any healthy, normal functioning person is going to know and be able to understand that you're getting with her for the wrong reason. And then, as a matter of fact, a person like that is going to destroy not just a relationship with a white woman, but relationships with a lot of people, because, like you were saying before, he's neurotic.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can do with white women is lay the racial guilt trip on them. I mean, if they're amenable to even that kind of shit at all.
Yeah.
What I'm saying? I mean, like, if you could be like, hold on, wait a minute. You just doing this shit because I'm black. Oh, no. Now, but personally, like, I've had white women come on to me. I had one take me to her fucking house, and I ain't even asked to go. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I told
story from the bar. I think he's
yeah, man. I'm like, man, I don't want to fuck with that, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not. Now, if I would have done some shit like that to her, just took her to my crib, I'd have been in jail. You know what I'm saying? Because she definitely would have called the police. But it's a double standard. But I guess it's to be expected. But at the end of the day, I even had some badass white chick come on to me, and I just talked to her like a regular nigga. And not that I had, like I'm just using slang and shit. And I guess, that kind of put her off. I guess she thought the way I looked would, be, like I don't know, like Jean Venice, like in Fanon's book. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to change my tonal inflections. I'm not going to change the way I'm talking. Like, if you can't accept me straight up and down, then, but if you really would have sat down and listened to me and got to talk to me, I kind of played off, bro. I mean, she could tell I was rubbing off. But, typically, I guess I had a girl at the time or something like that, and I was probably meeting her at the bar or some shit. And I ain't want all that static no way. So I've even had white women come up to me and give me shit, like free tickets to baseball games and shit like that. Like, I'm scratching my head, like, what is this about? Like, why are these white women giving me shit? You know what I'm saying? But
I think that's the experience, man. It's kind of counterintuitive. From my experience, I would say white women make excellent partners for black men. I know that sounds like cooning and like a sellout. And what's this nigga talking about? You can't say that. Even if it is true, you can't say that bullshit. What the fuck's this nigga talking about? I get it sounds fucked up. I'm gonna say it anyways, though, just because it's important to to put these ideas out here and at least and challenge it. Maybe it isn't true, but I think for a lot of black men, you go to Mad Bus Driver's channel, and what he talks about. From my experience, I see, I'm not a big fan of his channel per se for some reasons, but the way white women treat black men in 2021, Yeah, they put money in your pocket. They're sweet. They, you know, they'll want to, they'll marry you. They'll give you children. They could be, you know, really, they just want a good man. A lot of times they just want a good man in their life. So, you know, a girl's trying to throw you some pussy, man. You throwing away that good pussy, man. Don't turn down that good pussy no more. You might have a good time with that girl,
I done
Dr.
turned
Gigi.
down black pussy too. You know what I'm saying? So it don't matter to me. Like, I mean, you know, just because motherfucker pitching don't mean I'm catching. You feel me? Just because a motherfucker throwing it don't mean I gotta accept it. It's just the way I feel. Like maybe I'm cocky or arrogant or some shit like that. But you know, it's I definitely, you know, I've never been the type of guy like, oh, I'm just like hard up. Like I can't find anybody. I just nobody who wants me. Nobody. Like, first of all, like, I learned as a youngster, bro. Like I had a motto. And it might be fucked up, you know, it might be distasteful, but I was like 100 hoes. That's what I'm doing. I'm hollering at 100 hoes.
Right.
Period. I don't care where they are. They could be in church, school, the library, the supermarket. It doesn't matter where they are. They could be in their car, roll the window down. They could be at Jack in the Box, what's cracking. Like wherever you are, if she look good, you got the impulse, like, that's attractive, get at it. Now, hey, Dr. Gigi, I didn't need a pickup artist to tell me that, huh?
What year were you born, if you don't mind sharing?
71.
Yeah, so I'm 2 years younger than you. I was born in 73. How old were you when you started macking like that? Because I did the same thing. I started when I was about 12 years old, 12, 13 years old. I was getting at everything.
Maybe about 16, 17. You know, I really wasn't into girls, man, for real. Like in, you know, my earlier, I was just cerebral, you know what I'm saying? And it just is what it is. But, you know, I hit puberty and then, you know, I graduated from high school and I just started being like, okay, well, whatever. Like, where's she at? Like, it's a fat old ass or, you know, like, is it some big breasts or a cute face or something like that? Man, I'm at it. Slim ones, thick ones, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'm at it. That's how I was thinking. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, you know, it's like, it's a numbers game. Every girl you holler at ain't going to be into you. Most of them are probably going to tell you no.
You're the how to be a player generation.
But like, I'm like, I got to the point where I didn't care. Like, so what? But I wasn't like forceful with the shit. I wasn't like, you know, if you got to accept yes. I ain't gonna take no for an answer. Like if a woman tells me no, I'm off immediately. Like I'm done. I got a man. Bye. Have a nice day. And then I'll turn right around and holler at the next chick that's standing 10 paces away from her. Why not? They'll do the shit. You know what I'm saying? Women will do that shit. You know what I'm saying? So
they like it.
Why would I not do it? I mean, oftentimes it's a chick look way better than the one I just got through hollering at. It's like, okay, let's go. Let's do it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's you. The shit I did, man, like sometimes I've taken a lot of risks doing stupid shit, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, I ain't saying unprotected sex, but, you know, like, shit, you know, you be at a bar drunk. Next thing you know, man, you got your hand down the woman's, you know, pants and shit like that. Like, what the fuck? Like, just living life, man. You know, that's how I was. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever. It could lead to a one night stand or not. Now, you know, it don't matter to me. I just had fun in the process. It's fun. But I'm 50 years old, man. I ain't got time for that bullshit. Women create distractions for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just how I look at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a distraction. And if you don't have a good partnership with a woman, man, she could tear everything you work for up, tear it into pieces. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be real mindful and aware of what's going on in this culture you live in, you know? But they're distractions to me, bro. Like, you could be doing something productive and they can come along and throw away, you know, not throw it away, but throw off your energy. You know what I'm saying? So that's not what you want. You know? So I'm all for being focused. You know, especially at this age, I'm like, man, I done knocked a whole bunch of stuff down. Like I'm like, I don't need to be just trying to knock everything down no more. Like I never would take that approach now you know, unless I wanted to, like if I was in a different city or some shit, and I was like, okay, well, I got some money to blow, let's blow it. Let's see what I can get into. And then I might get into that mode. But, you know, just on GP, no, man. And a lot of times guys, man, try to conquer women, man, to prove something to their boys. You know what I'm saying? That's to me, I'm too old for that shit. I ain't got nothing to prove. I got kids out here and shit, man. I ain't got to prove I'm a Mac to nobody else. Fuck all that. You know what I'm saying? Too much bullshit. You know what I'm saying? But at any rate, man, all I wanted to do was read the counterpart to, you know, black women. And I thought it would be fitting because, I mean, both black men and black women could exhibit neurosis when it comes to interracial relationships. It just is what it is. Okay? You know, if you find a nice girl, she sweeps you off your feet, and it's because you like her and y'all have a natural affinity for each other, cool. But if you're trying to play out some sort of sick racial fantasy or some shit, you know, that to me is, you know, absurd. You know what I'm saying? I just, you know, that's just what it is to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, that's just my opinion, man. You know, culturally, there might be a lot of differences between black women and white women, but, you know, I've seen some white women be some straight bitches to their partners, man. Like, I've seen it with my white friends. I'm like, what the fuck, bro? Like, did you just let her do that shit, bro?
They could be horrible.
Like, are you fucking, man, like, I mean, just acting like asses. You know what I'm saying? So,
I know a white girl. I had a friend who dated a white girl. Now, he didn't treat her right. He might have even deserved it. He he had a baby with her. Turned out it wasn't his baby. Turned out it was another dude I knew who got her pregnant, and she ended up changing the kid's name because he was like, this is my boy. I ain't going to give him that dumbass name, and change the boy's name. And then another dude I know, he had a white girl and he used to beat her. So I stopped being friends with him, and it turned out his girlfriend ran a train with a bunch of his homies. I was like, oh man. So it's a lot of trash bag white chicks out here too. I ain't gonna cape for white women like that. You got to be white women are all women are dangerous. Now some, you know, the ADOS women are a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more spiteful in a lot of ways, but by no means though, white women are not safe. They're women. They're Western women, and they can be awful. They'll rip you out they'll rip your families apart. They'll take you to family court, to divorce court, put you on child support. They'll cheat on you. They'll lie to you. So, you know, thinking that there's safety with white women, I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think there is no safety like that. But as a man, like you don't want to have that neurosis. You have to have a sound mind. You've got to have a healthy outlook on life. You have to choose a family structure for yourself that works for you. You've got to, and you want to have good character and good integrity. You want to be a man with morals who's upright, because that's what a good woman's going to be attracted to. The type of woman that's going to make a good wife for you, a submissive, cooperative, healthy wife. She's going to expect good qualities in you. And so you've got to display those. Now, if you start thinking that you're gonna start picking a woman on skin tone, I highly recommend not doing that. Pick women based off of core values, based off her submissiveness to your life plan and your goals and what you want for yourself. That's what it's about. Put yourself out there and require submission from a woman and a healthy, high functioning mind, a woman who's got strong core values. If you do that, you can get a good partner for yourself. But you never can pick a woman because she's white. That's foolishness.
Yeah, man. So if any of the other panelists want to say something, I'm encouraging you now to speak or forever hold your peace, because I'm reaching the 3-hour mark. I actually didn't intend for it to run this long, but you know, I hate to leave you guys. So if any of you all want to make a statement, please do so at this time, and then we about to burn out.
Not really any statement, just to say that I really enjoyed listening to the panel. And yeah, it'll be good to be on another panel at some point in the future. So yeah, thank you, fellas.
Yeah, you're always welcome here, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
Welcome. Charlie Brown, would you like to make a comment?
Always a pleasure, GG. But yeah, man, it's swirling thing. You know, you got to be cautious with every group of women, but largely, you know, it's ran by whoever got the money. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you, bro. So look, we coming to a close on this show, man, and yeah, just check out Frantz Fanon's The Black Skin White Mask, man. Is there any truth to it? Maybe. I mean, you're always entitled to have a different of opinion about anything any author says. You can agree or disagree. So I just wanted to present it to you so that you can see it, because I know a lot of people make swirling arguments on both sides of the coin. So check it out. And there's a lot of literature that you could use as supplementary or secondary sources to, decipher some of the stuff that's in there if you find it difficult to read. So, that way. So having said all that, man, y'all be peaceful, man. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace. Peace.